Hello there, Seamus.
Hi, Piers.
Well, we're back here again, and it seems we have another guest on Is That So?
Joining us all the way from the Netherlands, we've got Eva. Hi.
Hi guys, lovely to be here. How are you?
Yeah, it's a good day.
It's a good day. Lovely weather.
So,
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Eva,
finally the summer hits Europe.
yeah, you're an expert on gemstones. That's very interesting. Very unlike a lot of our guests. You know, I don't think I've ever met a gemstone expert myself.
Yeah, I think most people have never met a gemstone expert before.
Well, that's cool to hear, actually.
So
Thanks for that.
Would you like to give us a little bit of background about how you got into gemstones and how your life brought you to love stones?
Yeah, of course, no problem. It's actually been quite a colorful journey as well.
Ooh.
And I used to be a lawyer. I studied law in the Netherlands and then started working for a big American multinational in Geneva, Switzerland, first of all.
Oh.
After law school, I ended up in Geneva and I did some internships there before ending up at this American multinational. And it was, well, something completely unrelated. It was a commodity trader dealing in grains and soybeans and fertilizer. Super sexy. But actually it was cool at the time and learned a lot. And then after a while I quit, went to study more law in your country, actually, in London. Did a postgraduate degree.
I live in London, but we're an Irish podcast.
Yeah, no, I know. But I saw you also you did the podcast also in London sometimes.
Yeah.
I read.
Yeah.
And so after that, went back to the same company, but then worked for them in the Netherlands. And that was great. But after a few years, I decided I was ready for more of an adventure and something else again. I've always loved languages, travel, and also fashion and design. And there were some changes in the company that made me decide, like, okay, perhaps now is the right moment to figure out what I've really loved.
How did you make that jump between
lawyering
law and gemstones?
Yes,
Right?
it's just a tiny one, right?
No.
No, actually, many people think that you wake up one day and you kind of know what your passion is, right? But I think that is actually for just a few fortunate people among us, perhaps some, I don't know, actors or opera singers or, I don't know, Formula One drivers. I mean, people who are really fortunate as a kid already to know what they want to become very passionately, right? And they pursue that from a young age. So in my case, it was a slightly longer journey. And I've never regretted doing the law. I've always loved the stories and the history behind it as well, which kind of links into gemology. I've always loved fashion and design, which obviously you don't have in law that much. My mother and grandmother were always, into interior decoration, or very good at that, and fantastic style and fashion sense. So I kind of miss that. Creativity in my job, I suppose. And then I remembered, by the way, I've also always come to France and Italy my whole life with my family. So I was used to the fashion sense of the French and the Italian ladies and how they spice up their outfits with fantastic gemstones and colored jewelry while dressing quite elegantly, but simply, actually. So that kind of influenced me as well. And then one night I was putting on my own gemstone jewelry earrings and I realized, you know what? Actually, I've always loved gemstones even more than the jewelry itself, just the history and the background of gemstones. And I remembered that as a kid in primary school, I once gave a presentation about minerals that all of a sudden resurfaced. And then I thought to myself, I actually really love this, but I have to study again. I Googled where are the best gemology degrees in the world. And then I found also London and New York, but also Bangkok, Thailand. And I read a few articles and I figured out that, or I discovered that Bangkok is today still the world's trading hub of colored gemstones. Wow. So for instance, very few people know that, nor did I. And what, for instance, Antwerp in Belgium is for the diamond trade, right? That is one of the diamond hubs in the world, as is Tel Aviv in Israel, as is Mumbai in India, these days very big, as is New York. Those are the 4 diamond trading hubs in the world. There is only one real trading hub for colored gemstones, which is Bangkok, Thailand, which is super interesting. So all the rubies and blue sapphires and colored tourmalines, you may have heard of those stones, that are mined elsewhere in the world, for instance in Eastern Africa or in Asia, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
They all come into Bangkok, the rough, as we call it, after they're mined. And in Bangkok, they are being cut, polished, and treated if they have a treatment, and also on-sold to gem dealers and jewelry manufacturers from all over the world. So I thought I'd better go to Bangkok because that's where the source is.
Yeah.
These guys know what they're talking about. My teachers know what they're talking about. More than in London and New York. At least that was my personal feeling. So that's how I ended up there.
So interesting.
Yeah, lived there for a small
Is
year.
there historical reasons that it's primarily located in Bangkok? Is that just where it always was, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that's very interesting, actually. Bangkok became very wealthy because of its gem trade a few decades ago. So it's not necessarily that it has been a hub for like centuries, as Antwerp has been in diamonds, for instance. It is more recent, but how it came about is quite a fun story, or why the Thai and Bangkok are so specialist in this.
Okay.
They used to be specialists in rubies and blue sapphires, the Thai. They also had some mining areas in Thailand. Not the best quality stones in the world, not the best rubies and blue sapphires in the world, but nonetheless, there was some mining going on. So they were used to some trade. Now, the Thai, the dealers were looking for new sources. So they traveled around and they went to Sri Lanka. And in Sri Lanka, the miners had mined this weird white corundum. And you should know that corundum, perhaps you know, is the family name to which belong both rubies and blue sapphires. So they are actually of the same family. When corundum happens to be red, we call it a ruby. And when corundum, the family, happens to be blue, we call it a blue sapphire.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So that is the distinction. And by the way, if it's any other color, because it can also appear in green, in orange, in pink, then it's always a sapphire. We call it the sapphire
okay.
plus the color. Only when it's red, we call it ruby.
What are emeralds then? They're
Emeralds is another family.
It's a
Yeah, emeralds
family,
is just
okay.
it's another family. So emerald belongs to the family which is called beryl, and which is another gem family altogether. And rubies and sapphires belong to the family corundum. So these guys were in Sri Lanka, and there were these white corundum stones that were being mined, which are basically worthless, right? Because they have no color. So who would buy a stone like that as a client in the West, right? And then the Thai, they looked at it and they thought in the back of their head, hey, perhaps we can do something with this and heat the stones. Heat treatment is a treatment which has been done for millennia. The old Egyptians already did it. And it's an acceptable treatment by gem laboratories around the world and gem dealers as well. So this is a normal treatment, especially for corundum. 95% of all rubies and blue sapphires have been heated, as we call it, in order to improve the color and to improve the clarity of the stones. But these Thai guys were thinking, okay, let's give it a shot. We can buy it super cheaply, which they did. The Sri Lankan buyers or miners were like laughing. They were like, oh my God, who are these crazy people just buying these bad stones of us, you know?
Yeah.
The Thai went home. They did some of their magic, as my gem teachers would say in Bangkok. And they had some, I mean, heating is quite old-fashioned. They have little ovens, literally. They use some products and they try to make the stones more beautiful. And what happened, at the end of the process, they got good quality blue sapphires out of that, which meant they kind of made a fortune for Bangkok. They put Bangkok on the map.
Well, and nobody had discovered this before at all, that this would happen if you heat the white ones?
No.
Huh.
Well, no, heat treatment had existed before, but the Thai professionalized it.
Right. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
So they turned them from white to blue.
Yes, and exactly. And you may think, or what many people of the West think, oh, those Thai, they are scammers or frauds. Actually, not at all. Because when you are in Bangkok, they are very open about it. And when you ask, has this stone been heated or not, you always get a very open answer. The thing is, the Thai saw a demand in the market which was that many people in the world wanted a blue sapphire and ruby. Not only the kings and queens and the celebrities who can actually afford the highest and best quality there is, but because these stones are so rare, so incredibly rare, people have no idea. The gem dealers could never supply blue sapphires and rubies on such a large scale to people in the West, basically. And now with this invention or professionalization of the heat treatment process, they could offer good quality rubies and blue sapphires at a better price to more people. So it's just the way how the economy works, right? They found a demand, they found a solution, and actually they're open about it. The problem often is when the stones end up in the West, there are many people along that chain, many of whom are not gemologists, also jewelry dealers in the West. It's not at all to blame anyone, it's just the nature of the business. And then when a consumer in the West ends up buying a stone, they often have no clue whether the stone has been heat treated or not.
Right.
Whether the price is fair or not. But actually it's very unfair to give the Thai this sometimes negative reputation, because they actually did a great job and gave us more rubies and blue sapphires and made them accessible to more of us.
Wow. I'd like to ask you, actually, Eva, why do you think people like shiny stones? Shiny coloured stones. Why?
It's a funny thing. Is it just the rarity, or is it the appearance as well?
Oh man, that's a good question. Now you go actually into the philosophy of beauty. Perhaps you should do another, right? Perhaps you should do another podcast with someone else on beauty, because what is beauty? I mean, why did Cleopatra want to adorn herself with beauty, or stones, or it goes back to the beginning of mankind. I mean, it is, I guess, the mystery of beauty, sparkle, color, both diamonds and colored stones, by the way. I mean, also in the old Indian history, perhaps you know, with the Maharajas and the Nawabs, India has always been a historic country of vast gemstone wealth. I mean, their nobility had some sort of dresses with buttons of diamonds that big. I mean, it is like a fairy tale almost. And why? It is to showcase wealth, power for sure, rarity. That's why also your own, or perhaps this is politically sensitive, I don't know, but Prince Charles, right? He proposed with a blue sapphire to Lady Di, and many monarchies know that rare colored gemstones are actually far more rare than diamonds to propose with. So
that's interesting as well, isn't it? Because we were talking earlier on, just before we went on the air, about the difference between diamonds and gemstones, and like we were talking about beauty there and it being cultural, right?
Yeah.
But diamonds really only became popular after World War II, right?
Correct.
When they were marketed as a beautiful thing and a thing that you have to engage with.
Yeah, it's amazing what the big diamond companies were able to do. Actually, I mean, talking about some great marketing, it is absolutely fantastic. Since the 1940s, we all of a sudden in the West have this urge that when we get engaged, or when a man is about to propose, it should be in a diamond. Period. It doesn't even pop up like as an alternative, like, hey, perhaps I should do something in pink or in yellow or in orange or in green because it suits my girlfriend better, or me as the guy. I also find the story much more interesting, and I think the story of our couple is also more interesting than perhaps the standard story of a diamond. I mean, do we even fit that old marketing story, right?
Yeah, and I'd never thought about it before, but it's interesting now when I think back. If you see even any movies from, say, the early 50s or 60s, there was a heavy use of diamonds and, you know, Breakfast at Tiffany's, those kind of movies.
Diamonds is a girl's best friend.
Yeah, with Marilyn Monroe, absolutely. I mean, there was a big and clever marketing campaign behind that. Actually, after the Great Depression in the 30s, there was not a big demand for diamonds at all, and as for anything probably. But I mean,
should we buy bread or diamonds? I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point. But it was like around the end of the 19th century that diamonds were discovered in South Africa. De Beers, right? And so these guys dove into that whole story, like how can we create demand here? So after the 1930s, after the Second World War, they hired this American advertising company, which did an amazing job and came with the most famous ad slogan ever created, "A diamond is forever." And,
right, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and they instilled this demand in all of us that when a man proposes, he should do so by buying a diamond that is worth 2 of his monthly salary payments. It went that specifically in the days. Like, she is worth it, you know? She's worth 2
of your monthly salary payments. That's what she's worth.
I don't know how much you get paid. It's a month and a half. I'm not marrying you.
Exactly. I don't care, but that's how it is. But they did an amazing job. And also, they tied in, I think I read somewhere, but I'm not fully sure about that even that movie with Marilyn Monroe and all that is kind of, you know, it was all about pushing the diamond upwards and make it the one stone you have to think about. And they did an amazing job.
It's incredibly interesting as well, because I guess normally when you think about markets and just economics and stuff, normally how people, or certainly I know the mind frame I would be in is I would think, there is a demand for something and somebody fulfills that, but these guys actually created the demand. They invented the demand.
Oh, absolutely. But this is actually indeed very interesting point, because also I think Steve Jobs once said with the iPhone, I mean, you cannot always ask the people what they want because they don't always know it, right? You have to show it to them. And that's what he did with the iPhone or the iPod. Sorry, not the iPhone. I think it was the iPod or something. That we wanted that, because if you would have asked people, they were like, "Oh no, I don't know if I really need that. Walking around with my music or right." So sometimes you have to show it and indeed create the demand. So
and Apple is such a giant now. I mean, it's almost worth $1 trillion at this stage. So
and I read somewhere about diamonds too that they're very expensive, obviously, but there's far more of them than you think. So with other stones, you're saying, so like with the gemstones, with the blue sapphires, they're incredibly rare, and their price is represents that. But the price for diamonds doesn't actually represent its rarity. Would that be correct in saying?
Yeah, that is correct. And what most people don't know is that diamonds, let's say up to 3-4 carats, and of average quality. And most diamonds in the world set in jewelry that you see in stores around you are of average quality, are not rare at all. There is more than enough diamonds in stock, held in stock by the big diamond producing companies to fulfill demand. Apparently, if all the women today who wanted a diamond, which is not every woman wants a diamond, but if all the women who wanted a diamond, right? Yeah, who wanted a diamond, apparently there is enough. And also, when you look around, when you travel to the smallest Irish, English village or Dutch village, and you see a small jewelry store, what do you see? In Asia, even in, everywhere, you always see diamonds. So how good of a job did they do to tell us that diamonds are rare, whereas physically, it's proven to the contrary. I mean, I mean, you see them. And how often have you seen a green Severide garnet?
Never.
Or an electric blue Paraiba tourmaline, or even you better a ruby or a blue sapphire. You see them far less physically.
I'm actually curious, because I know like diamonds actually have uses, or say they're wanted for things outside of jewelry. So in medical technology, for instance, is it the same for other colored stones, or are they mostly just jewelry?
That is a good question. It's true, diamonds are used also for industrial purposes. Right. And the same with some color gemstones, you're right. Now I have to think a little bit back to my gemology classes, but if I remember correctly, quartz, which is a color gemstone, quartz is a family name, like corundum was for rubies and sapphires, and beryl is the family name for emerald. Quartz is the family name, for instance, for a stone you may have heard of, like amethyst, which is the purple stone, you know that one, and perhaps citrine, which is yellow-orange, rose quartz, which is pink. Those 3 stones belong to the family quartz. Now, quartz also comes in transparent, white, almost like glass. And I think it is used like white sapphire, which also exists. So that basically looks a little bit like a diamond, right? I mean, it's transparent, colorless, is used a lot in the watch industry. For the, I think it is for the, I don't even know the English word right now, which is below where the, I don't know the English word for that, but it is used in the watch industry. It could be the glass which is that goes over your watch, or it could be the pointers that point the time. I don't know the English word for that. I forgot.
The hands of the
something like that, or the magnetism that is required. And I think quartz and white sapphire can be used for that as well.
Yeah, I've heard it say, like you see it advertised on watches sometimes that like their core. I think it's to do with the mechanisms because they have I don't know how exactly it works,
the back works of the watch. I don't know exactly, but to answer your question, yes, it is also used for industry and other purposes.
Okay, cool. Right, interesting.
So we've talked about the uses. We've talked about the heating process of different ones. And we'd like to talk about how you got into the business. Then, you know, if you had the interest and you did the study, how you moved on to actually selling and creating jewelry with these gemstones.
Yeah, well, it was in Bangkok where I got some sort of gemstone bug, I reckon.
Right.
So after having lived there for a small year. I bought a few gemstones at the end of the gemology program and brought them back home to just see if people would like them. And I actually sold them to friends and family. And I was like, wow, this is just the loose gemstone, as we call it, right? So the stone which is unset, not even in a piece of jewelry. And I did get some comments of friends of mine. They said, yeah, Eva, it's really nice, these loose gemstones, and I love to buy it and make it into a ring myself. But could you also make some jewelry with it? Because we work 10, 12 hours a day. We have no time for this, no inspiration. Why don't you make jewelry as well, right? So I went back to Bangkok and tested and visited a lot of smaller factories there or workshops. And I finally ended up working now with 2 very small ateliers, workshops that I make jewelry with as well, which is great. And I visit them quite regularly. And then when I'm there, I always source the gemstones. And I have the ideas of the designs, of course. And then I come to them and I visit them for weeks, go to their office every day. And we talk about what is possible in jewelry, goldsmithing, so to speak. And then they make it for me. And so I just finalized my second website. And now I'm trying to see if I can go into New York or London, perhaps. And I would love to start by educating people about colored gemstones. First of all, actually, to open up the myths a little bit.
Right, yeah. And so it's interesting as well. You talk about sourcing them now. There's obviously everybody's seen vast amount of videos and even movies about how the diamond trade, Sierra Leone, gemstones around the world can be sourced really unethically, quite harshly. How do you, or do you even get the opportunity to source it with the knowledge that it isn't going to harm anybody?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and also sometimes clients ask me that, and then I'm going to say, with my law background, I feel obligated to say, look, I am not physically there in the mine myself, in East Africa or in Tanzania or in Mozambique or in Burma. So I cannot, of course, always guarantee that there are no perhaps 16-year-old children working there, because you should also realize it's their way of income there.
Of course, yeah.
So sometimes, of course, we put our Western hat on and we walk in. I also know this with the work I did in the company. We also had to implement a anti-fraud policy everywhere, all over the world, which of course is always a goal we should aim for. But sometimes we forget that business is sometimes run differently in other parts of the world, and we can come in and try to control it as best as we can, but you're not there 24 hours a day, at least not me as a small business, as a one-person business owner, you know what I mean? Right. What I do know is the gem dealers I buy from are the most amazing people, and I trust them for 200%. Otherwise, I wouldn't even buy my stones from them. And I know where they go physically. They themselves, these are also one-person companies, or they just work with a few people. They tell me their stories when they go to Africa or to Asia, and the contacts they have with the local people there. So I know in that respect, it is fine. But yeah, I don't know. I cannot vouch for all the other people who sell gemstones, of course.
Right, of course, yeah.
And though the line is shorter than with the diamond industry, and the mining is far more on a smaller scale and less professional than the diamond mining companies, so we know more quickly. I mean, my gem dealer will know, I don't know exactly, where he gets the stone from. So he knows the guy he bought it from. You know what I mean? So that is quite direct.
Knows him, yeah.
Yeah. So in that respect, there is definitely more transparency than with diamonds. Also, the nature of the product makes it difficult, right? Diamonds are all white, so it's quite hard to distinguish where they can be from. Whereas with color stones, we know, okay, certain stones only come from certain areas. So
certain mineral deposits and stuff.
Yes.
Right, of course.
Yeah, it's very interesting as well. I'd like to move on from that and talk about, obviously, the people mining the gemstones and the places where they're mined. They're often revered, given godlike status, special powers, healing abilities, stuff like that.
Right, yeah.
Because if you're all you're used to seeing is like limestone every day, and then you pick up this thing, and it's just this yellow shiny rock, you could think, yeah, of course it could have special powers, and that could be a way that gemstones have been revered around the world, even if we haven't revered them in Western culture until,
in the same way.
Yeah, in the same way. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. That could be a reason. I also think, however, it is just plain beauty. I mean, when you look at the definition of what is a gemstone, it possesses three characteristics, which is number one, beauty, and then rarity, and then durability. Those are three characteristics of a gemstone that make it a gem quality stone. You can add to that portability and fashion, because some colors or stones are more popular during certain centuries or during certain times than others, right? But it's always been the first three: beauty, durability, and rarity. We want what we cannot get, right? So even the old ancient rulers knew that. And then if indeed, in addition to that, for instance, a blue sapphire has always stood for nobility and truth, apparently. So then it adds, a story to something that is already so rare. So yes, it definitely makes it more interesting. And
Well, building on that, I'm just curious. Obviously, because we can only really see this from a Western perspective. But is there any specifically different ways that different cultures interact with these gemstones in comparison to the West? Like, is there different traditions around them that you know of, or different ways of wearing or anything?
No, I'm not really specialized in that. I'm sorry.
Right.
It has always been adornment. I mean, for instance, the emerald, the most beautiful one, is said to come from Colombia. That has always been the most revered mining area, especially the Muzo mine, which has been operating for centuries already, if not millennia, if I'm not mistaken, which is incredible when you think of it, that a mine so ancient still produces emeralds today. So it has always been used for adornment, and I think even in old Maya culture as well. I mean, I have a Colombian friend, and they absolutely adore emeralds as well, obviously, and probably even more accessible to them. But like of rituals or other more habits of small local communities, I'm not really aware of that. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I suspect you're largely correct, and I do suspect it's mostly adornment because, well, as you were saying there, when if you see depictions of the old Mayan or Incan or Aztec emperors, they're all covered in emeralds, and I never thought about that, but it is always specifically emeralds.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's definitely, and yeah, they just know, I guess, the rarity of it and the beauty. What if you've been born around that area? Apparently, as you say, right? They always dig up sand and earth, and then all of a sudden, something like that, it becomes almost divine, I reckon. And perhaps we carried something of that feeling from the ancient awe for something like that into today's diamonds and gemstones as well, because that has never really disappeared.
Okay, yeah, I did say that too. How does a raw gemstone, like just a rough gemstone, turn into a cut gemstone? How does that process work? You know, you often see diamonds in a specific way. You know, there's a characteristic diamond look, but I've often seen
the round brilliance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've often seen gemstones cut in completely different ways and different fashions. Why is that, and what's the process?
Yeah, that is actually interesting because, well, first of all, the cutting, the mining areas in the world today, I'm talking about color gemstones, right? Are Eastern Africa. So that would be especially Tanzania, Mozambique, the island Madagascar, Kenya, also a little bit. Those are very interesting new mining areas, we call them. The older color stone mining areas were to be found in Asia and still are today. That is Burma, the old Burma, today's Myanmar, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Sri Lanka. The old Ceylon is like a sapphire paradise where they have found color gemstones for centuries, which is super cool. And then they mine them in those areas. The rough, as it has been mined, is shipped to Bangkok. And that is where the stones are cut and polished and treated. Now, the cutting is very interesting also with the old diamond cutting, actually. There were some famous diamond cutters centuries ago who were renowned for their expertise. And often you had to go through a whole learning school as a young kid who wanted to become a diamond cutter. Still today, these are really the last crafts, I would call, of today that still exist. It takes years before you can call yourself an experienced cutter. Why? Because also what you want to do as a cutter, you have a rough stone in front of you. You want to make sure you cut away as little as possible and bring out as much beauty as you can while cutting away as little as possible of the weight. Why? Because all gemstones, diamonds and color stones, are priced in the market based on their weight. So if a stone is smaller, so lighter in weight, it will be less expensive than when you have a bigger gemstone, which is heavier. So then it will be more expensive in the market. So we always price stones per carat. And carat is the metric of weight, right? So it indicates how heavy the stone is, basically. You can put a stone in a little weighing scale, and that will indicate the carat weight. So the cutter knows this. He's like, okay, I've got to cut away as little as possible because the buyer, the gem dealer, wants me to save as much weight as we can, and then make it as brilliant as possible. Now, the cutting process is slightly different with diamonds and color stones. A diamond cutter will want to bring out as much brilliance as he can out of a diamond, right? Why? Because that is the biggest asset of a diamond. That's why every woman wants a diamond, because of the sparkle, right? And the size, of course. She wants that rainbow-like sparkle, the flashes of red, blue, violet, pink that fly off a diamond when you move your hand. That is what a diamond is renowned for, not for its color. So how do you get the best brilliance and sparkle in a diamond? By cutting it as symmetrically as you can. So diamond cutters go for symmetry. And for that, especially the round brilliant, which is a relatively recent discovery, now we have the tools to make a perfect round diamond, which is very hard because it is the hardest material on earth, right? So
of course, yeah.
Right? So in the previous So in the previous centuries, they weren't even able to cut a round brilliant cut, because to make it round you need extreme precision and symmetry in your cutting, and they couldn't do that before. Now with laser cutting, they can in the factories. So then they make symmetry, and they have this perfect round brilliant, which has the maximum sparkle. Now, color stones you rarely see in rounds. That is on purpose. The color stone cutter knows that when he has a rough stone, he cannot cut away as much as the diamond cutter would to get to this perfect symmetry. Why? Because the most important asset of a color stone is not brilliance, as with a diamond. It is color. Color.
Of course, it's in the name.
It's in the name, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes we forget it, because the more red a ruby, the better the blue of a blue sapphire, the higher the price of the stone will be. Even if the cutting is not perfect, even if the stone has inclusions inside the stone. If the stone is of such magnificence blue or red, it can still go to a Sotheby's or Christie's auction. It is unbelievable, because that color is so rare that many people want that stone purely for that color, even if they know it hasn't been cut to perfection like a diamond. So the gemstone cutter knows that as well. He knows that, okay, I have to keep the color as intense as possible. And when he cuts away too much, and when you lose too much of the weight of a color stone, it can become lighter in color. The cutter knows that.
The further you go towards the center, the lighter it can get.
Now, yeah, it is more. Yeah, it is the densest, or at least the volume.
Oh,
the more
of course,
volume
yeah, the more
stone
you
has,
see,
right?
you see the same effect with glass, yeah.
Yeah. The more intense the color will be.
Right.
So a gemstone cutter will cut away as little as possible, try to keep the color as intense as possible, and that's why cutting is generally not so perfect in color stones as it is with diamonds. And that is not when, again, many people in the West say, oh, those people in Asia where most of the cutting happens have no clue about cutting. They actually know exactly what they're doing. They know it far better than the people in the West. They're actually trying to give you most value for the stone that they can get for you. Yes, and that means sometimes the cutting is not perfect. Now, if you do want a color stone, which has a great color and is more symmetrical in cutting, they do exist in the market, but they are rare, and you pay a premium for those stones.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I don't want to imagine.
Yeah, no, you don't want to. Because generally, color stones, the cut is average, and that is okay as long as the color is great.
Okay, right, yeah.
Do you have any idea of the most expensive gemstone or diamond in the world? I think there's a list, isn't there?
Well, probably the Queen's one in England, right?
Yeah, the Queen, your Queen has some nice ones, it's true.
Not our Queen.
Sorry.
Well, temporarily our Queen, Seamus.
That's all we have time for today.
Yeah, okay, whoops, let's rewind that. Let's delete that part. No, but it's true. There are some big ones in the Tower of London.
Yeah, I've seen them. They're amazing.
Yeah, it's stunning, isn't it?
Yeah.
And but also in ancient crown jewels of most monarchies around the world. I mean, I don't know if you had a look, for instance, at our monarchy. We had a coronation. What was it? Only 5 years ago, right? Our queen abdicated, and her son and his wife, they kind of became the new king and queen. And at that coronation, she wore blue sapphires that were out of this world in her crown and in a brooch and earrings, I think. I mean, those stones you rarely see of that quality. It's amazing. So if you have time, you can Google afterwards.
Eva, I absolutely love your passion towards gemstones. I honestly couldn't. It's like, it reminds me of like a very avid sommelier, like a wine taster. That's honestly, you could just an absolute passion for it. Like, clearly a non-arbitrary thing, but very specialized. You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks. Well, it's true. I mean, also sommeliers, they have that. You're right. I mean, it's yeah, and I think it just keeps growing also, because after your course, I think, like with any specialization, perhaps in my opinion, you only learn afterwards, right? You have to keep on seeing stones and
right. And there's the same with wine. There's depth to it as well. It's one of those things where the longer you're in it, the more you realize there's more to know.
Yeah, or the more you realize you lit the little.
The small amount. I'm actually curious. This is a bit more of, I guess, like a trivial question or whatever. But do you have a favorite gemstone?
Yes, I do. Well, yeah, actually, I have several, obviously.
I thought that might be the case.
One of the most beautiful ones that you should absolutely remember is called Spinel, or Spinel, as the Americans pronounce it. It is Spinel. One of the most historic gemstones out there. Also in the crown jewels, there is a big red spinel in the Black Princess ruby crown, as we call it, which was a big crown that, I forgot him now. I have a blank for a second. The old Prince of Wales, I think, was he called the Black Prince?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, right.
One,
that was I think he was called the Black Prince, and during one of his fights, he as a victory trophy, he kind of won this humongous red stone, and it was set in a crown, which is now in the crown jewels. Actually, it's a red stone. It was always mistaken for a ruby. It turns out it is actually a red spinel. And spinel is one top gemstone, like rubies and sapphires, that belongs to the top gemstones, and has often been mistaken for ruby because people couldn't distinguish gem species very well in those days. And only later did they figure out, this is actually an entirely different gemstone. And that stone also comes in beautiful traffic light red, as we call it. And it also comes in hot pink, which is a trade term. It literally means neon bubblegum pink, which is an incredibly funky color. You're like, does that even exist? It's super modern, super cool. And gray, white colors, beautiful. It has no treatment. Very high brilliance, very good hardness. As we say, hardness refers to the resistance to scratches that a gemstone can take, and spinel has a higher one, meaning it doesn't get scratched very easily. So that is an absolute beauty. Another beautiful stone that I prefer way more than the green emerald is another green gemstone, which is called tsavorite garnet, which is absolutely stunning. Relatively recent discovery from the 1960s, 70s from East Africa. Far better quality than an emerald, generally. Beautiful, intense green, very transparent, very sparkly. An emerald almost never sparkles because it has a lot of inclusions inside the stone, as we call it, which flattens it, which makes it a little bit dull even, and can chip very easily in emerald. Tsavorite garnet not. It's a far higher quality gemstone. Absolutely amazing. Less expensive than an emerald as well. Not cheap.
Absolute bargain. Yeah, I'll go get one right now.
Absolute bargain. No, it's gorgeous. You should look it up. It's
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eva, we're almost just going to tie up. If you'd like to, it was a very, very interesting talk. I have to say, I couldn't have even imagined gemstones would offer me this much knowledge. But would you like to link your social media, your websites for everybody?
Yeah, great. It was always a pleasure. Also a pleasure talking to you guys. Absolutely lovely. And my website is evagemsandjewels.com. And Eva, you spell EVA, not AVA, as some people think. It is EVA, gemsandjewels.com. And it would be great if you have a look. I just redid it, relaunched it. So I'm curious what you guys think.
You have an Instagram as well?
Yeah, you can also find me at Instagram, which is at evagemsandjewels, which is my handle there.
Jewels, fantastic. And I hadn't even thought about it, but Instagram is probably the perfect platform for gemstones, right?
Yeah, true. Also, to show photos and to educate people a little bit. And now I'm trying also a video. Scary, but true. So trying to see how that works, but it has been great fun.
Well, there we are. At the end of the day, it's night.
If you're sick, you won't be well.
Thanks very much, Eva. See you again next time, guys.
Thank you so much.